voting list number 23 and 24. And vote list 23 is a consent calendar. So these are bills that, House bills that the cross files have passed unanimously. And so take a look through these. You presumably voted for the cross files on all these bills on list number 23 on the Senate cross file the first time out, but that doesn't obligate you to do anything this time. But take a look through these bills and see if you want to separate anything out. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to. Okay.
Number 23.
Okay, so we're on voting list number 23. The vice chair has moved favorable on the consent calendar. These are, again, House cross files of Senate bills that have passed unanimously. Is there a second? Okay, second from Senator Brooks. So, okay, all in favor of the consent calendar vote, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the consent calendar carries unanimously. And now, before we get to our final action item for the day, vote list number 24 are bills that we did pass the cross file, but they were not unanimous votes, so we can't put it on a consent calendar. So on these bills, Stacy, we're just gonna, let's go through these bills. There's not very many. And, you know, then we'll be done with that, and then we'll just move to this one presentation from Devin and see where we are. Okay, so Stacy, I guess starting with House Bill 75.
Yes.
Cross file Senate Bill 262.
House Bill 75, Election Law Special Elections. This emergency departmental bill makes changes to state law governing special elections that relate to the timing of special elections to fill a vacancy in a county council or in the office of chief executive officer or county executive, a conflict between a county charter or other county law and the provisions of the election law article or the Code of Maryland regulations relating to the conduct of a special election, and third, the administration of special elections conducted by mail. The vote in EEE was 7-3, with Senators Gallion, Carozza, and Simonaire voting in the negative, and the Senate vote was 32-13.
Okay, so everybody got the gist of how they voted the first time around?
And this is on the HB 75?
Yeah, HB 75. 262 already passed on a 7-3 vote. And so if everybody would like to be recorded the same way they did the first time, the bills are the same, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, House Bill 75.
I'm looking at online. So Senate Bill 262 is what we.
Is the bill that we passed.
Okay. On the floor, it shows a 10-1 vote with Watson in opposition. Am I on the wrong bill?
You're in Senate Bill 2, would be my guess?
262.
Okay.
And then
You're right.
the floor vote was 46-0.
Oh, sorry about that. I must have looked at a different bill.
Okay, well then Watson was the lone dissenting
Yeah.
vote on a 10-1 basis, and it was 46-0 on the floor. Okay, well, let's take these up one at a time. On House Bill 75, it was 10-1 the first time, unanimous on the floor. Any discussion on House Bill 75?
I'm favorable.
Okay, Senator Kagan moves favorable. Senator Augustine seconds. Okay, this time around, House Bill 75. All in favor, House Bill 75, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, this time it carries unanimously 11-0. Okay, Stacy, let's move to House Bill 197.
Okay, House Bill 197 is a cross-file to Senate Bill 68, Public Schools Restorative Practices Schools Comprehensive Plan. This bill requires the Maryland State Department of Education by July 1, 26 to develop a comprehensive plan for the establishment of restorative practices schools and, upon request, provide technical assistance on becoming a restorative practice school. In developing the plan, MSDE must seek insight from subject matter experts. If a local board of elections chooses to establish a restorative practices school within the local school system, the board must use the comprehensive plan. By December 1, 26, MSDE must report to the Governor and General Assembly on its comprehensive plan for the establishment of restorative practices schools. The bill also updates the requirements for the state's school discipline guidelines and regulations to include restorative practices instead of approaches. So I have it up in front of me, so I know this is right. The E vote is 7-3 with Gallion, Carozza, and Simonaire in the negative, and the Senate vote was 31-13.
Okay, everybody got that? This is a cross-file of Brooks' bill.
I'm favorable.
Okay, we got a favorable from Vice Chair, a second from Senator Augustine. Okay, I'm assuming the vote may be very similar. All in favor of the bill, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the bill carries 8-3 with Senators Gallion, Carrozza, and Simon-Ayer in the negative. That bill does carry on that vote. Let's next move to House Bill 324.
House Bill 324 is a cross-file to Senate Bill 293, County Boards of Education Anti-Bias Training for Members Requirement, County Board Member Anti-Bias Training Act. This bill requires each member of a local board of education to complete an anti-bias training program at least once during their term. The training program must be the same as provided to public school employees. However, the anti-bias training for board members must be conducted separately from the training provided to public school employees. The vote in EEE was 7-3 with Gallion, Carrozza, and Simon-Ayer in the negative, and the Senate vote was 32-13.
We do. Is there a motion?
Move favorable.
Okay, Vice Chair moves favorable, second from Senator Augustine. Again, we're on House Bill, what's our number? House Bill 324. All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the bill carries 8-3 with Gallion, Carrozza, and Simon-Ayer in the red. Let's next move to House Bill 344.
Maryland Environmental Service Membership of Board of Directors alterations. This bill is the cross-file of Senate Bill 315, which passed this committee unanimously. The bill alters the composition of the Board of Directors of the Maryland Environmental Service by replacing the state treasurer with the Secretary of Planning and making conforming changes. The reason this bill is on the list is because the House bill came over in a slightly different posture. You want to take a look at on the back of voting list number 24, you will see that the House, in addition to swapping out the treasurer for the Secretary of Planning, the House also added one member of the Senate and one member of the House as non-voting members of the MES board. Their thinking was that not having the treasurer there is sort of the General Assembly's eye is on the board. They wanted legislators on there instead.
Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? The treasurer wanted off the board, but which we accommodated here. But on the other hand, having some representation from the General Assembly is what the House did. Yes, Vice Chair Kagan?
Thank you, April, because can you just say how many people there would be on the board with two legislators and what the House was thinking in terms of making the legislators non-voting?
Again, the second one is the easier question. So the non-voting, because there are separations of powers issues with having legislators as voting members of essentially an executive agency department. So in terms of how big that would make the board, so currently there are 8 members. This would bring it up to 11. Or no, sorry, 10.
Right,
Okay,
move to conform.
we have a question from Senator Augustine.
Did the House already act on this and change it?
Right, so this is the House version of the bill.
And they also changed Senate Bill 315?
Oh, I don't know if they've, I believe they have. I think they have.
Because it's already showing, there is a reprint that shows the members. on
Yeah,
it.
so they might have already voted on this, which this committee will have to concur with or not concur with. It's not a done deal.
Okay, but I was just, we just did it without any changes beyond just the treasurer,
Correct.
and they've already acted on the Senate bill. Okay.
Right, and so when they send the Senate bill back over, we'll either have to concur or not concur. Obviously, if we take the House bill here as presented, then we logically would be concurring when it comes
Yeah.
back, so.
On the,
Sure.
I think I don't know the answer as to the frequency with which this board meets. I, having been a representative from, Senate, and it's just, we're very inconsistent on our level of participation in things like this, and I just don't know about setting that up. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. No, the mic was pretty far back.
Yeah.
I was just saying that we're on a lot of these kinds of things, and our commitment to participation, I don't know the level of what's required of this board, for example. Like, I don't know if it means monthly or whatever. I just get concerned, having served on a number of these, where, we don't always have the best of participation, and it's just not a good look, honestly. It's just not.
And in answer to that question, they meet monthly.
So they're meeting monthly. I mean, that's actually a fairly significant commitment by one of our colleagues to do that. Well, they got one on there, but I'm thinking about the Senate, and so I just have
Okay,
some
why don't we do
concerns.
this? Okay, let's let this percolate a little bit. Let's think about it. We can make some adjustments. So we'll bump this to, Monday and, think about how we might send it back to them with something. Okay, we're actually, Devin, we're in the two-spot primary is finance on the Rogers bill, House Bill 895. Why don't you tell us what that bill does?
House Bill 895, Employment and Insurance Equality for Service Members Act. This bill generally establishes uniform definitions related to the military and the business occupations and professions, business regulation, commercial law, economic development, financial institutions, general provisions, insurance, labor and employment, state finance and procurement, and state government articles of the Maryland Code, primarily by reference to definitions in the U.S. Code. House Bill 895 is identical to Senate Bill 279 as it passed the Senate, and EEE is secondary on the bill.
Okay, is finance, you said it's already passed this? Okay. Okay, any questions? Again, we're in the two spot on this one. Okay, Senator Kagan moves favorable, second from Senator Augustine. All in favor of taking the finance product to us? All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, and then finally, you've got the House Bill and cross-file Senate Bill, Wallach-Heddleman Bill, House Bill 1193, Senate Bill 944, April. Why don't you tell us what those two bills do?
All right, House Bill 1193, Housing Development Permits, Local Reporting Requirements, Maryland Housing Data Transparency Act. This is the cross-file of Senate Bill 944, which is also on this list. The committee has not moved the cross-file yet. The bill requires, as it came over from the House, each county that meets the definition under the land use article of a local jurisdiction with at least 150,000 residents to report to the Maryland Department of Planning quarterly beginning January 1st, 2027, specified information relating to building or development permits that include a residential housing component. Bill also authorizes municipalities to report such information in the same manner. A county must make the reports publicly available by July 1, 2027, and as information becomes available thereafter, the Maryland Department of Planning must publish reported information on a public, interactive, and searchable website, and generally report to the governor and the General Assembly on information collected under the bill. Bill takes effect July 1st, 2025.
Are there any amendments that are?
No, so this is the bill as it came over from the House. If the committee chooses to move it, we would conform the Senate bill. The way this differs from the bill as it originally came in, as the bill came in, it would have required this information to be reported monthly, and it also had a slightly larger application. So as the bill in its current posture would essentially apply to the following jurisdictions: Anne Arundel County, Baltimore County, Charles County, Frederick County, Harford County, Howard County, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, and Baltimore City.
So it's slightly different than the Senate bill that we heard earlier in session. Yes, Senator Croza?
Was just trying to refresh on this one and was pulling up some of the testimony from the House bill, and it looks like MML was opposed to that. I don't know if any of those issues were worked out.
Yeah, so the bill as it originally came over, or originally was introduced, apologies, would apply to all local jurisdictions that met specified requirements. As the bill was amended in the House, again, it only applies to large counties, counties with more than 150,000 residents, and does not put any requirements on municipalities, but it would authorize them to report that information if they wanted to. So basically, the municipalities are out.
Okay, so,
Other than the city. Other than the city, which is vote.
Well, Baltimore City is not considered a municipality.
I've always been taught that they're counted as a city and a county for MACO and MML.
I don't know, maybe for that purpose, but
okay, Senator Watson.
generally, the code treats them as a county.
So April, if I'm reading this right.
Okay, questions, Senator Watson?
Yeah, if I'm reading this right, it requires the local jurisdictions. Oh, that issue, not to issue 50 building or development permits. Okay. So it's a reporting bill, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yes, Senator Washington?
This is just a question, just with staff around reporting bills. Is it possible for some of these to be put in, or I've seen reports being put into as language in budget bills, or are there, just out of curiosity, are there other mechanisms to, other than a law? Particularly if we get a bunch of reports that come over, is there some other way to do it?
Typically, the reports that I've seen in budget bills tend to not be annual reports, but one-time reports that are
all right.
required under
Got
the,
it.
joint chairman's reports, as they
That's the
call them.
difference. Yeah, all right.
So it's a little bit different.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I mean, do people have information? Is everybody, yeah, Senator Gallion?
Monthly to quarterly?
Yes, or the Senate, or the House bill changes, that makes that change.
Okay, and Senator Heddleman did indicate she's good with the House version for what it's worth, but, okay, any other just questions? Otherwise, we could do a roll call. We could, yes, or we could take more questions, or we could hold it till Monday. Senator Augustine.
So we did not have a second hearing on this, right? So
No.
on this version and on this bill, and because of that, I'm imagining that's why we don't have like the new sort of Department of Planning and the other stuff, like where they would come out on this, as this is, or do you know, April?
From my communications with the Department of Planning, their biggest concern was simply that there is a cost associated with it for them to compile this data and to put it into a searchable website. The fiscal note reflects that.
And then as a follow-up to that, like, now that it's just restricted to the counties, how will it be different than what the counties already provide?
It is more comprehensive information than is what is currently required for them to report.
But then they're the ones who are going to have to then give the information to the Maryland State Department of Planning
Correct.
versus their own. That's what this would do. Oh, and they have to do that on a quarterly basis
Correct.
after they're the ones who had to collect the information and do everything anyway. So they're going to have to then, will it force them to have to collect additional information, or this is likely information that they're already collecting, just not necessarily putting on the website?
It is information that they might not even really necessarily be collecting it in kind of this format. My understanding is that there's sort of, most of them have this information, just it depends kind of on the software that they're using to, to compile it, whether it's really going to be in this specific format.
Again, if we need some additional information, we can, is that where we're moving? Okay, let's get one more question from Senator Carrozza.
I understand from the amendments that MML now is okay, and I'm assuming that with the amendments that the realtors are still okay. And if that's the case, I'm okay with it.
Well, I don't know who's okay or not okay. I'm just, that's where we're, okay, why don't we do this? Let's do this one too. We've got the two bills, the House bill, Senate bill. We'll bump that and let's see if we can get a little more clarity on whatever we need to before we do any vote. Okay, guys, with that, then that's going to bring us to our final action item for today. And so just, let me just make a kind of a comment before I turn it over. We're talking about Senate Bill 931, which is the third of the so-called three package energy bills. We've passed two, Hester bill, the Senate President's bill yesterday. This is the third. Now, the House did meet today with the hope of having all three bills, but it turns out, I think they have not moved any of the bills. But that's not our issue. We need to just kind of keep doing our thing. So I'm going to have Devin, like we've done with a lot of bills, Devin's going to walk through the bill. The good news is on this one, it's not 68 pages like the bill we passed yesterday. It's only 21 pages. So I think this will be, but I do make, let me just make a few observations and then just to kind of, you know, we've obviously talked a lot this session about us relying on out-of-state energy. 40% of our power come from out of state. And it's going to get a lot worse as demand goes up and our in-state generation, coal, oil, et cetera, goes down. So we do have a problem. And, you know, the net result of that, and again, we've been talking about this since session started about, that means more transmission lines, more impact property rights, higher energy costs, that imbalance. And the bill we passed yesterday was strong. You know, there's nuclear, there's some natural gas, but some of these are, and you know, other areas like offshore wind, I think Senator Carrozza could be on hold for a while. So, you know, the reality is there's some longer term issues that we dealt with yesterday, but in terms of short term, we had Director Pinsky in here during session with that report. And he did highlight in that presentation the fact that solar generation and battery storage are pretty significant in terms of solving this issue and of resource adequacy, et cetera. And it's not a blue state, red state thing. I think I've said this repeatedly. I have to say it again. Fastest growing state in the United States for solar right now, by a long shot, is Texas. And the same thing with battery storage. Texas is light years ahead of the rest of the country. Double solar generation than any state in the nation. So it's not a political thing. And we also have a lot of solar projects in that PJM queue that we've talked about that are going to come online. So that's the backdrop. At the same time, we have been rated the worst state in the nation for permitting and siting regulatory-wise. That's third party looking at Maryland and saying, it is a huge problem. A lot of folks would like to build here, but the regulatory environment is problematic, and whether it's uncertainty, local zoning, et cetera. And so, again, if we want to get projects online soon, quick, I think we're going to have to make some changes in terms of, on that front, in terms of regulatory certainty. So, but we all sat in the joint hearing room, we heard the pushback. We heard pushback from MACO, farmers, ag communities, et cetera. Okay, that was the hearing as on the bill as introduced. And so I think, let me just make three big points and then I'm going to turn it to Devin to walk through what the bill now looks like. And again, subject to some still more modifications potentially based on what the House does. But I just would say this in terms of MACO, and I think they're here, but I don't want this to devolve into another bill hearing. I mean, I would say many of the MACO proposed amendments, if not, maybe not every single one, but the vast majority, when we talk about statewide siting, setback standards for solar battery storage projects, standards that do not exist anywhere in the state of Maryland now, in the state law, those amendments have been adopted and they are now in this reprint. So these are most of the MACO amendments laying out statewide standards on, again, everything from, I think I'll just kind of list some stuff. It's not just setbacks, it's about whole variety of things, in terms of grading and soil and all that kind of stuff are all incorporated into the bill. The other thing, I think, just big picture, is on the property rights issue. Okay, no farmer in this state, I'm going to repeat it, is being forced to sell their private property to any solar developer or anyone else. Okay, private property rights are preserved in this bill in any way, shape, or form. And then finally, and I think this is the biggest part of the bill, and Devin, this may require some conversation, but right now, legally, and this we have the Maryland Supreme Court has weighed on this, the state of Maryland has state preemption authority over all locals in this state. So those counties that have zoning authority or zoning ordinances, including my own, I represent the Ag Reserve, most of the Ag Reserve in Montgomery. The PSC can approve a project right now and take 100% of the land in every ag community in the state. That's legal, legally authorized right now under Maryland law. And so this bill, and this was not in the original bill, but this is addressing a lot of the farming ag community concerns and pushback, establishes a priority preservation area solar cap. And once that cap is hit in those preservation priority areas, the state preemption that currently exists will no longer exist. And so that issue of what percent of the priority preservation areas are going to be protected and what, so we're starting with 100%. Now the solar developers, of course, want as much of that land to be permissible for solar installations and development. Obviously, the ag and farmer folks want a very small percentage. So the solar developers said of these particular areas, which is defined in Maryland State Code, well, let us develop on 15%, 20% of that land. And then it was negotiated to 10, and then it was 7. Okay, under this bill, it's 5%, meaning, in a nutshell, the state of Maryland is giving up 95% of its legal authority to use state preemption to allow solar deployment in these areas, these ag preservation priority areas. 95% the state is giving up. And only in the 5%, only up to 5% in those areas can you develop solar. Once you hit the 5% cap, our legal state preemption authority is, we're giving it up. And so now do the farmers want, I mean, so again, the developers would like to have 100%, 20, we're down to 5. The farmers probably would like 2 or 3. So the 5% is, I think, allowing for some growth in solar, but conceding 95% of our state authority. And so I think before we take questions, I mean, that's just sort of big picture. I really want Devin to walk through the bill, the actual specific language of the bill, and then we could take some questions, but sure.
One question.
Yeah.
It's something that we end up answering. So, and this is on the 5%. So that's just of ag priority areas, right? It's not the whole acres of the whole state, including non-ag areas.
Correct.
Correct,
Okay.
but those are the areas where our farmers and our ag
Right.
folks and, really are most concerned.
So starting into this, before we roll through it, to reach our goals for solar, I think when Director Pinsky was in, I can't remember, it was like 20 or 30,000 acres, somewhere in there is what we needed to reach those goals. Is that right?
It's something like that.
Okay. So does that equate to the 5%?
No,
So it's 2%?
it's 2%.
It's 2% to meet those goals? Okay. It's good to know starting out. Thank you.
Discussion about that, back to, we'll have to, some of the data is a little, okay, I think it's relevant to this. We probably should get as good data as possible because, obviously demand's going to continue to increase in this state. So relying on where we are right now, but yeah.
And yes, everybody agrees demand's going to increase, but also as we worked through the bill yesterday, as we work towards making it a little easier to maybe have some nuclear and some other things, that would take some of the pressure off potentially the solar.
Well, 10 or 12 years from now, I mean, the problem with nuclear or some of the other projects we're talking about is, with permitting and, I mean, I'm all for it. We supported that, but these projects are going to be, they can come out of the queue out of PJM next year. And so we're looking at how do you get some of this in state generation moving
Right.
much quicker than what a nuclear power plant or new reactor or even some of the natural gas, what projects that are contemplated in yesterday's bill. So, you know, I hear you. I mean, this is
I
a
understand
balancing
that.
act. Let me
Right.
just make this big point. I said it even yesterday about the big bill. You don't like some of it, you like, I think the same thing applies here. We need in-state generation, but we're trying to come up with a balance here about protecting preservation priority areas, but we need generation. Otherwise, we're going to have to
Right.
deal with more transmission lines. We're going to have to, you know, deal with property rights, all the stuff that we hear about, and then ultimately costs. The supply-demand imbalance is part of the reason that we had the utility rate bump this year. So I think it is a balancing act. But
It is, but just one last thing before we start to go through it, if I may. You know, once, and out of that hearing, I think there were some not real accurate things when they said, oh, after 20 or 25 years, you can just rip these solar things out and go right back to ag. That is absolutely not the case. I mean, it would take so much remediation to get that ground back in. So I think as we move through this, we need to keep in mind that once this, whatever the percentage is, once this ag ground, that's where we're growing our food on right now, once it's out, it's very unlikely that it's going to go back. Possible, yes. Probable, absolutely not. So thank you.
Okay. Well, again, that's why we're here to talk this through. So with that background, Devin, I'm going to turn it to you on Senate Bill 931 and just walk the committee through what the bill actually does say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before you, you have a reprint of Senate Bill 931. Senate Bill 931, Public Utilities Generation Stations Generating and Siting Renewable Energy Certainty Act. If you would turn, please, to page 5. The previous pages are the purpose paragraph, function paragraphs, adding in additional language, and then definitions. I guess page 4, important to see that that's the beginning of the definition section, and the priority preservation area definition is there that the chair spoke to. On page 5, this is where the requirements to build solar begin, and that's in C on page 5. Person may not begin construction of a solar energy generation station unless the commission or the locals for the commission for a solar generating station that's more than 2 megawatts, the locals for a solar energy generation station that's less than 2 megawatts, verifies that the proposed construction meets all of the site requirements that you're going to hear about in this bill. So for a utility scale 2 megawatts or greater, for that, the solar energy generating station needs to have a CPCN. That's already in current law. The construction will have to be approved by the commission under the provisions of this bill. And for megawatts, 2 megawatts or above, the construction has received approval for all local permits required under the Section H of this bill that we're going to get to. Page 6.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
That would be the new language about the local permits, is that?
So let me walk you through that directly, Senator. On page 5, in subsection C, a person may not begin construction of a solar energy generation station unless the commission or, for a solar energy generation station that produces 2 megawatts or less, the local jurisdiction verifies that the proposed construction meets all of the siting requirements that are going to appear later in this bill. For a solar energy generating station that has the capacity to produce more than 2 megawatts, in addition to making sure that those siting requirements are met, that generating station has to have a certificate of public convenience or necessity, a CPCN. The construction has to be approved by the commission, and then those local permits required under this bill have to be. That's correct. On page 6. Beginning we'll start at the top of the page. A person that submits an application for approval for a solar energy generating station here will include written documentation or other evidence showing that the proposed construction meets the requirements of that are going to come up later with regard to siting. For a solar energy generating station that has the capacity to produce not more than 2 megawatts of electricity, a person that submits a site development plan to a local jurisdiction shall include with that plan written documentation or other evidence showing that the proposed construction meets the requirements, again, of subsection F and G of this section. And when verifying this information, the commission for 2 megawatts or above, or the local jurisdiction for under 2 megawatts, shall, if the proposed local location is in an overburdened or underserved area, to make sure that the community feedback is collected. So the rest of that section talks about the community notification process. And this is a beginning of parts of the bill that are, as the chair indicated, are accepted amendments from the Maryland Association of Counties. So I can walk through all of those if you'd like, or we can skip ahead, whatever you prefer. So the vice chair says walk through them, so we were going to walk through them. So sub 2 there, subject to subparagraph 2 of this section, the meetings required under paragraph 1 shall be held in the county in which the proposed solar energy generating station is located and within 10 miles of the proposed location of the solar energy generating station. If the owner of a proposed generating station cannot find a meeting location, then they may select an alternative location that is closest practicable to the location of the proposed solar energy generating station. And then, except as provided in paragraph 9, an owner of a proposed solar energy generating station, and this begins the siting requirements, shall provide a boundary of 150 feet between the solar energy generating station and the nearest wall of a residential dwelling. Shall provide a boundary of 100 feet between the solar energy generating station and all property lines, not including property lines that bisect the interior of the project area that's defined earlier. Shall provide non-barbed wire fencing only on the interior of a landscape buffer or immediately adjacent to a solar energy generating station. The barbed wire fencing shall not be more than 20 feet in height, shall be only black and green vinyl wire mesh if the owner proposes to use chain link fencing, and that is not less than 50 feet away from the edge of any public road right-of-way. May also use barbed wire fencing, may actually use barbed wire fencing around the substations or other critical infrastructure for the protection of that infrastructure, and shall provide a landscape buffer or in accordance with a paragraph coming up. Yes, Senator.
Matt?
Yeah, and just to clarify, most of these are, again, from MACO, are largely MACO.
Correct.
Proposed amendments. Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a really random question that I don't know the answer to. How noisy is a solar installation?
So there is really not a whole lot of noise. There can be a hum. There can be a hum because and if you think of a transformer and that hum that's associated with a transformer, there can be a hum.
So if it's 100 feet from my house or 150 feet from my house,
You're not going to hear it.
okay, not going to keep people up at night, not going
No.
to have any, okay.
And some of those, some other restrictions and requirements are to address
To mollify
that.
it.
Okay, let's
some of that. Thank you.
take Senator Gallion to weigh in perhaps on this one.
A lot of those buffer questions, though, are not so much for the sound as for having to look at it.
Correct. That's correct.
So you have the fence, and then outside the fence, there's supposed to be some kind of like trees or something like that?
I'm coming to that, yes.
Okay, I might be a little ahead, but as we
Okay.
get through it, I just wanted to see if there was anything in there that makes them actually maintain these things when the tree falls over and stuff like that. So, sorry, I was maybe a little early on that and
That's all right.
preempted you. Sorry about
So, on Senator Gallion's point, top of page 8, shall provide for a landscape buffer or vegetative screening in accordance with paragraph 3 of this section. Except for equipment required to interconnect, the array, ancillary equipment, or accessory buildings may not be placed in the public road right-of-way. Senator Gallion shall mitigate the visual impact of the solar energy generating station. This is sub 6, number 1. On a preservation area, rural legacy area, priority preservation area, public park, scenic river or byway, designated heritage area, or historic structure or site listed on the eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, shall also include in an application for a site development a viewshed analysis for any area, structure, or site. So there is going to be an analysis of the viewshed for the solar energy generating station, and that will be particularly, obviously, for ones that are less than 2 megawatts, that will be determined by the locality. Shall provide notice of each proposed solar energy generating station to the emergency response services of each county in which any portion of the generating station is to be constructed, including a map of the proposed generating station and the proposed location of any solar collector or isolator switch. A local jurisdiction may not require the use of a berm for a solar energy generation station approved under this section. That's the only thing that is not allowed. But the buffer of vegetative screening required in this section shall be not more than 35 feet wide, shall be provided along all property lines, locations of the exterior boundary for the solar energy generating station where existing wood vegetation exists of 50 feet or more in width, or an alternative location within the boundary for the solar energy generating station if the owner demonstrates that the alternative location will maximize that visual screening. Provides for 4-season visual screening of the solar energy generating station.
If people have questions along the line, we got Senator Hester had a question or light on, and Senator Washington.
Senator.
Thank you, and I appreciate your patience, Devin. I was just curious, when we start talking about the preservation area, the rural legacy area, the priority preservation area, the public park, this is all on page 7, VI. That's not what we're putting the solar, that's about the view
No,
shed,
that's
correct?
just about the view shed,
So we're
correct.
putting the solar on private land
We're putting the solar on private lands or priority preservation areas.
and priority. So-
We're not putting the solar on rural legacy area. Those, the exemptions are coming later, so I can
So
talk
what-
about the
where-
exemptions later.
The priority preservation area that we are putting the solar on, what is that?
So pretty much each county, not every county, but pretty much most counties have designated priority preservation areas that are designated by the Department of Agriculture. And they have chosen areas in their county where that is ag preserved land.
So that's the farmland forever stuff.
That's the farmland forever stuff.
Which we're paying them for.
Which I cannot answer that question.
Okay.
But that is the area that the chair spoke of that is limited to 5%.
Gotcha. Thank you.
We're going to go to Senator Washington, then we'll go to Senator Gallion after that.
Thank you so much, Devin. Where is the permitting, the permitting language? Is there permitting language around here that sets up the process for site approval and stormwater management and erosion and sediment control?
So I talked about some of the permitting
Yeah,
requirements
yeah,
earlier.
So just, yeah.
So let's go back to
Thank you.
page 5.
Okay.
That's the requirement, here on page 5 are the requirements for the commission in when the applicant begins the process of the commission. The rest of the permitting requirements are going to be subsequent in the bill, which we'll get to in a few minutes.
I don't see the word permit, so is it,
So recall that for a solar energy generating station, that if it's above 2 megawatts, it requires a certificate of public convenience and necessity. That is the permit, if you will, for the development of a solar energy generating station.
but then there are local permits that address stormwater.
Correct.
And
So,
erosion and
so
those types
for
of things.
both
So-
under 2 megawatts and above 2 megawatts, as it's in line 13, beginning in line 13 on page 5. A solar energy generating station that has the capacity to produce not more than 2 megawatts. The local jurisdiction verifies that the proposed construction meets all of the site requirements here And for larger than that, the construction is approved by the commission. But also, in order to get the CPCN or get local approval for lower than 2 megawatts, they must meet all of the local permitting requirements, such as minimizing effect to wetlands, et cetera. So that's already in law. That's not changed by this bill.
Okay, I will have some questions about clarifying that, because that's it's important that there are permits that are related to the environment, and so.
Nothing in this
Process.
bill
Right.
obviates the necessity for any solar generator to get those permits.
Right, so there's no requirement to.
They are required.
Yes.
This bill does not alter their ability, they're required
Okay, so-
to get those permits.
All right, so the issue, what you're saying is the issues that are addressed in this bill do not change any requirements, but there might not be anywhere else where they are required.
Correct. The issues in
So
the,
if one is interested, as I am, in ensuring that there are, that are, if at least from state law, because I know we want to remove the local barriers, that there should be there are permits from the state, and those should be.
correct.
Okay.
Those are still appropriate and are still, there are no changes to those.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, Devin, back to you.
So, as I do often, I forget where I am. So we just went through the vegetative screening. Let's look at page 9. Again, continuing with the buffers language. So I mentioned four-season visual screening of the solar energy generating station. The buffers placed between fencing and the public include multi-layered staggered rows of overstory and understory trees that are a mixture of evergreen and deciduous, are predominantly native to the region, are more than 4 feet at height at planting. So the trees will be at least 4 feet in height when they are planted. Are designed to provide screening or buffering within 5 years of planting, and designed to grow. May not be trimmed to stunt upward or outward. Conform the plant size specifications established by the American Standard of Nursery Stock. Are specified in the landscaping plan prepared by a qualified professional landscaping architect. Be installed early in the construction process as practical, and before activation of the proposed solar energy generating station. Preserve to the maximum extent practicable and supplement it with new planting, any forest or hedgerow that exists at a location where visual screening or landscaping buffering is required. Shall be maintained with a 90% survival threshold for the life of the solar energy generating system through a maintenance agreement that includes a watering plan. With respect to the site, the sole owner of the generating station shall minimize grading to the maximum extent, may not remove topsoil from the parcel, but may move or temporarily stockpile topsoil for grading. To maintain soil integrity, shall plant native or non-invasive naturalized vegetation and other vegetative protections that have a 90% survival threshold for the life of the solar energy generating station. Shall limit mowing and other unnecessary landscaping, may not use herbicides except to control invasive species in compliance with the Department of Agriculture's weed control program.
Let's interject. I said this the other. All this is standards that do not currently exist under state law. So these are new requirements, standards, uniform that do not currently exist. I just and just on that point, Senator Gallen,
Roman numeral 8 on page 9, it talks about the life of the system. So we're kind of figuring that's 25 years?
They vary, but it could be anywhere between 15 and 25 years.
So that's good that it has to be maintained that long, because just like with tree plantings or anything, if you don't, it's going to have a mess. And it has a 90% number. So how's that enforced? 10 years from now, you get something up, who goes around and checks and says, well, there's still, there's 92%. How is that possible to enforce that?
I'm getting there.
Man, I'm always too early.
So,
This is where it's good to have a guy with your back. I mean, you're asking all the tough, good questions, you know. That's true. Okay, back to you, Devin.
Now I'm losing my place. You all keep making me lose my place. So on page 10, at the top of the page 10, Senator Gallion shall post for the first 5 years of the life of the solar energy generating station a landscaping bond equal to 100% of the total landscaping cost with the county in which the solar energy generating station is located. So they have to post a landscaping bond for the first 5 years of the life of the solar energy generating station, and that will be relevant in just a second. Subject to subparagraphs 2 and 3 of this paragraph, a local jurisdiction shall hold any landscaping bond required for, it's supposed to be a number in there for the 5 years. A local jurisdiction shall release half of that landscaping bond if upon inspection, the vegetative protections meet a 90% survival threshold. Following the release of a landscaping bond under subparagraph 2 of this paragraph, the remaining landscaping bond shall be held for an additional 2 years, and then upon further inspection and confirmation that the vegetative protections continue to meet a 90% survival threshold, shall be released.
Go to Senator Hester. I guess, again, Senator Gallion, it's an attempt to kind of hold money back until you can prove up. But that said, let's go to Senator Hester.
I'm sorry, I'm still back on page 9. On 4 and 5. So we're limiting the mowing, and then we're not using herbicides except for noxious weeds. So what happens? Like, are we talking goats or sheep or like?
So recall that this is the section for vegetative screening and buffering. So
Okay.
the thought is that the requirements are to put trees and bushes up. So trees and bushes won't have a whole lot of grass underneath them for mowing. This does not apply to the inside where the solar array is going to be established. This is the ring around the solar array. So it is limiting mowing. It's not saying that they can't mow, but if, when I do landscaping in my yard around I don't have very much grass, but I have a weed whacker, and I'd weed whack everything that would be growing out of the ground. The requirement is just to make sure that the mowing isn't necessary for areas around vegetative screening whereby there are bushes and trees, not grass. But it's not a prohibition on mowing, it just is a limitation. Please limit your mowing. We don't want you mowing every morning at 7 a.m. Around the solar array if you're near to houses. And we don't want you to disturb the land and the soil that Senator Gallion is concerned about as well by overmowing that property.
So this may be going down a rabbit hole, but once you have inside the buffer, you have the solar panels.
Correct.
Underneath the solar panels is some kind of vegetation.
Correct.
Can you mow
Yes.
that?
Yes.
And are there any limitations on the herbicides that go there?
The herbicides, not inside the solar array, not inside the fence line.
That doesn't make any sense, because if you're limiting the herbicides on the outside but not the inside, you're still putting a whole lot of herbicides in a certain area. And I raised this, and I wasn't exactly kidding about the goats, because there have been instances where they've over-applied, whatever kind of herbicide or pesticide it is, and it's really gotten into the water, in that area. And so is that later in the bill, or is the bill silent on that
So the
topic?
bill is silent on it, but again, recall that in order to get approval for the development of this, they have to have the environmental permits associated with any kind of development of any energy generating station.
Right. So would the existing kind of agricultural nutrient management plans not apply anymore to this area?
If this is not substituting any nutrient management plans or anything else that is already in state law.
But so like if you're doing this on it
So
goes back to whether you're doing this on ag land, right?
So,
then are we
correct.
not, if it's 5% of this, the ag reserve, the rest of the ag reserve is, you got to have a nutrient management plan or not? I don't know. Right, so is there any? So if you're growing, I mean,
Jason, if you want to put your mic on, if you're responding to Senator Hester.
So to need a nutrient management plan, there's different things, like you have to have so many animal units, or you have to have so many like acres or so much money that's being generated by that operation. So there's different things that kick in whether or not you need a nutrient management plan. So if you take something that was ag and change it basically to a power generation station, I'm not sure if, I don't know why that would still have a nutrient management plan if now it's technically a power generation station. I'm not 100% sure on that.
zoning from ag to something else? I mean, it's still,
Technically, it would still be,
Yes, it would still be.
ag.
I mean, I think you got to
It would
answer
be ag.
that question. I mean, and then if you do have the goats underneath who are, because there's a guy in Frederick who brings his goats to Howard County to like literally eat the grass beneath the soil. I mean, he's a great guy. I'd love to introduce you. But then does that qualify? The goats come on and then they go off.
I think for the animal portion of it, it's what, 8,000 pounds? Back there.
Hey, can I just, okay, Dom looks like he's going to jump out of his seat because he seems to have an answer and he just, okay, but we're not going to have a mini bill hearing, but if questions pop up and you've got a good answer, then we'll let you,
Just to be very clear on the zoning, so this does not change the underlining zoning. So the underlining zoning, oh, sorry, Dominic Butchko, Maryland Association of Counties. I'm so amped up on this question. So it doesn't change the underlining zoning. The state is not overruling zoning, but the state is overruling what can go on that land that's zoned. So it's still agricultural, but now you're having potentially an industrial use solar on an agricultural land. Just a very specific point.
Okay, thank you, Dom.
I mean, if it's still if it's still agricultural land, then do we need an exemption from the nutrient management plan, or?
So an exemption for the nutrient management plan. So, I mean, you're not using it for an agricultural purpose at that point. So you're not.
Not even if it's agrivoltaics, it's not
Well,
agricultural.
agrivoltaics is separate.
Right, so we'll get to
And
that
so
eventually.
the landscaping requirements, and I believe there's going to be an amendment for that, would carve out agrivoltaics completely. So anything under agrivoltaics, so the standards that you have here, it wasn't the intent of MACO to apply those to agrivoltaics projects because they're a unique animal in and of themselves.
And it's, can you get cover crops? Like, I mean, if you want to do a cover crop underneath the solar panels, is that allowed?
You wouldn't have that on the type of solar projects that we're talking about here because, these solar panels are a lot closer together. You can't get the equipment through. Anything with crops, it's going to be a very specific agrivoltaic project.
Okay, I'll wait till we get there.
Okay, Sarah Washington.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think this is for Devin, thanks. This is going back to page 6, and it has to do with the the requirements for impacted areas.
Correct.
And could you tell us what in impacted areas, it looks like they have, so that would be on page 6, and that is line 11, right, starting on line 11. And it says the commission or the local jurisdiction, and if it's, in an overburdened area, that they're collecting community feedback and having a meeting. But what else is done?
So-
Yeah, I want to understand.
So for a solar energy generating station that is 2 megawatts or above, the Public Service Commission has a hearing process for that. They have one hearing on that, on a solar energy generating station approval. For a solar energy generating station for under 2 megawatts, the local jurisdiction would normally have some kind of hearing for it. So what we're saying here in this legislation is that if the proposed location for either 2 megawatts or above or under 2 megawatts is in an area considered to be overburdened or underserved, whether it's the county or whomever, it doesn't matter, because here we are saying that in addition to those hearings, The person constructing the solar energy generating station will hold at least 2 additional public meetings to be located to collect in the station's area where it's to be located. So in addition to the already established processes for both 2 megawatts and under or over 2 megawatts, there are 2 additional meetings that are required to be held if that community where the solar generating station is to be built is an overburdened or underserved community.
So so there's a meeting.
And collection of feedback. And so you hear and then the commission
But is there, so there's a meeting, but I guess, is there anywhere where there's a decision, which is why I was looking at the permitting process, there's a decision that this is an overburdened area and it can't go here. You know, it's just sort of, I don't know why you have a meeting and then there's nothing. I don't know. Is it referencing somewhere else where something can actually come of that meeting?
So the idea of this portion of the bill is to ensure that a community has as much information as they can possibly have so that they can go through what the normal CPCN process would be or the normal county process would be in order to say, I don't want this here.
Okay, can I just, Senator Washington, the reason, because the Public Service Commission is required under the Supreme Court case from a few years ago to take into account local input and feedback as part of their analysis.
Right.
So this is actually, this perennial case talked about, yes, the PSC can move forward, but local input is actually part of the process. So I think this is part of that information gathering process. So, but I don't, I'll yield back to you. I just want to just throw that into the equation.
I get that. And so, this goes back to my permitting process and the real, interest in a process in which you're not just showing up and not being able to actually do anything about it. So I did it. No, so I get it that if it's in an impacted area, then the sort of accelerate where where they are not required to do that much public meetings. But what does it actually do? I mean, there's something a little later about, which was edited out, about walls of the residential dwelling, et cetera. But if, the point of overburdened is that the community probably already has been disrupted, by BGE plants. And so to simply give them an opportunity to talk about it. So I didn't know if the PSC is then able to require the boundary. Is that what this is? It's saying like there has to be a boundary. You have to say, well, this is actually not a good place to have it because this community has been the site of successive, placement of energy generation. I mean, like where does that would need to be accommodated? So if there's somewhere in the bill or reference or we need to amend that, because otherwise we don't even need that section. If you're just going to say you can have 2 more meetings, that's not making a difference.
So I believe that this section is to provide additional information in the process so that prior to any approvals of any of the permits that are associated with it, whether they are in this bill or whether they already exist in law, this is additional information to allow those permitters, the folks who are executing those permits, that additional feedback so that they can put requirements in to any permit that ends up being approved through this section.
Okay, all righty.
Devin?
Just would like to work on something that
That's
is
fair.
more clear about, what happens.
Okay, let's just get, really would love to get through the bill, but these are all good, very good questions. So, Devin, so I think we left it off, we were in the middle of page 10, I think, as I recall. So let's just.
So following the release of the landscaping bond, the next section, number sub 6, it's except it's required by law for safety of emergency, the solar energy generating station may not emit visible light during dusk to dawn operations. So you're not going to see lights hanging out from the solar generating station. So this next to sub 7, This paragraph does not apply to the equipment for interconnection equipment or land that's already being used for ag purposes. So think of agrivoltaics. Proposed solar energy generation station and any accessory structures associated with the station must have an average height of not more than 15 feet. So it limits the height of the solar energy generating station. Setbacks for solar energy generating stations shall be measured from the property boundary to the nearest solar array or accessory equipment, buildings or facilities that generate, maintain, operate, manage, or distribute or transmit electricity. It may not apply to any interconnection of the line or facility because obviously the interconnection line is going to cross boundaries because you're connecting it to a transmission line. The owner of a proposed solar energy station may provide to the commission or the local jurisdiction written documentation of a siting agreement entered into with the county in which the proposed, so the county and the solar energy the owner may enter into an agreement with the county that provides less stringent restrictions than those are enumerated in this section. If a proposed, so the county and the solar owner can agree to less stringent, but this is the ceiling here. I'm at the bottom of page 10.9.
Okay, Senator Gallion, you want?
So if the property owner and the county agree to it, I mean, where does that leave the neighbors that are going to be looking at it? I mean, they're not brought into that. It's just between the property owner and the county.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's just for the provisions of siting. The buffers, the vegetative screening, that sort of thing.
The vegetative screening, really the whole purpose of that is for the neighbors, right? That's not, I mean, that's not a county, the property owner is looking at it different than if you're the adjoining property owner and are looking at this all the time. That should be, they should kind of be in the forefront, I would think, on something like this. But
If you would like to bring my friend up, who this amendment is for, I'm sure he probably has an answer.
This is a Mako amendment. Let's see. Mako, could you respond to Senator Gallion's concern about the neighbors? Mako's not interested, you don't care about neighbors?
No. Dominic Butchko, Maryland Association of Counties. So, Senator, to your question, the way this would be implemented is everything here is a ceiling. So local jurisdictions can set, lower thresholds if they wanted to. Talking with our members, the way this would be implemented is Harford County would more than likely be at the top of that ceiling, but Howard County, for example, would want to be at the bottom part of that, and they might want to have something that's a little less stringent, or in a certain area they might want to have it that's less stringent. We don't view this as being implemented in on a case-by-case basis. It's the county sets the policies, and this is the ceiling for those policies.
Thank you, Dom. Okay. Devin?
If the proposed solar energy generating station provides to the commission or local jurisdiction written documentation in accordance with this agreement with the counties, then the proposed solar energy generating station shall be considered as meeting the requirements of this section. So if they agree, then they've met the siting requirements. I'm now on page 11G. The owner of a solar energy generating station shall enter into a decommissioning agreement with the commission, shall post a surety bond with the commission for not more than 125% of the estimated future cost of decommissioning the solar energy generating station and its related infrastructure less any salvage value, and shall execute a securitization bond true-up every 5 years. Except as provided in paragraphs 3 or 4, local jurisdiction, let me stop for a minute here. Okay.
Senator Hester has a question here. Senator Hester?
Estimated future cost. How is that calculated? Is that like, is that in today's dollars, or is it adjusted, like?
It'll be today's dollars adjusted. Because you can't prospect out. You're going to say what it would cost today and then add in inflation and other factors to try to.
Is that defined somewhere, or is that like standard?
That's
estimated?
standard.
So there's an accounting practice for estimated future costs.
For estimated future cost of
Okay, thank
decommissioning, yes.
Okay, Devin, back to you.
So what can't you do? Except as provided in paragraphs 3 and 4 following this, a local jurisdiction may not adopt zoning laws or other laws or regulations that prohibit the construction or operation of solar energy generating stations, or deny site development plans for solar energy generating stations that meet the requirements of the siting provisions that we talked about earlier. And the local jurisdiction, sub 2, shall expedite the review and approval of site development plans for solar energy generating stations if those plans meet the requirements of this section. And for solar energy generating stations with a generating capacity of 5 megawatts or less, process the site development plan as a permitted use subject to standards in the land use article. Number 3, a ground-mounted solar energy station with a generating capacity of more than 5 megawatts may not be located, let me say that again, a ground-mounted solar energy generating station with a generating capacity of more than 5 megawatts may not be located on any lot, parcel, or tract of land that, as of January 1, 2025, is located in either a Tier 1 or Tier 2 mapped locally designated growth area adopted by the counties in the land use article, a medium-density residential area or high-density residential area, as defined in the natural resources article, or a mixed-use area within a residential component, with a residential component. So no medium and high-density areas can large utility-scale solar be built. No Tier 1 or Tier 2 mapped growth areas, no mixed-use area with a residential component. So those are one set of exceptions.
Senator Gallion.
What's the Tier 1 or Tier 2 map locally?
I knew someone was going to ask me that, so I did pull it up. Oh, yeah.
Hey, Dom,
why don't you
rush up here, come on.
Yeah, so while I load.
Yeah.
I know you have this off the top of your head.
Yeah, so Dominic Butchko, Maryland Association of Counties. So Tier 1 and Tier 2 growth areas, every county has growth areas in their comprehensive plans. It goes to Tier 1 through 4. Tier 1 is where we're currently developed, where your towns are right now. Tier 2 is where we're going to go, where we're building the infrastructure. And 3 and 4 is where more rural landscapes.
So if in one of these areas you have some kind of major development, you're going to do a huge project like on the roof or something, this is separate from that? It would still be allowed, right?
So this is for ground mounted. This is not for a rooftop or for a parking lot. Yeah, so those would still be allowed.
Separate. That's
that would be
still allowed
separate, yeah.
Anywhere.
Yeah. So the intent of this is there's a particular case out of Chestertown in Kent County where the municipality was growing into a certain direction. A solar developer came in, and where we were putting that infrastructure, they actually bought the land and put a solar field, so we couldn't put housing there. Doesn't happen a lot in Maryland. It's happened a handful of times, and this is to prevent that from happening.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
Senator Kagan.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Did someone else? Okay. Going back up to the top of 11, Devin, if you could just speak for a moment about the decommissioning concept, and just want to make sure that I and we are educated about how that goes. So I own the solar field, and rather than waiting 25 years, maybe I'm out after 8 years. I go out of business or something. Could someone else move in, fill in the gap until it's done? And then second is if it's past its useful shelf life and now it's done and you're removing all the detritus, would the CPCN, would the approval process be different if there had been a solar installation in that space already with so much of the infrastructure and capacity and guidelines already done? Could some new entity move into the same place and have any different sort of permitting process or hoops to jump through?
So the answer to your first question is if someone wants to buy it after 8 years, they would take the entirety of the contract, including this decommissioning requirement. And your second question is, whatever is there has to be removed. It has to be returned to the way that the land was prior to the construction of the solar energy generating station.
The buffer seems like that could stay.
Well, yes, that's
Okay.
inside the fence line of
Okay.
it is where the decommissioning agreement would apply.
But then, would there be any different approval process, no, it
No.
starts as though it's a totally new space.
Correct,
Never used before.
correct.
And
So-
that's clear in this bill or in our existing law?
That's clear in existing law.
Okay, all right, thank you, Devin.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
yes, Senator Hester.
Who defines what goes in a decommissioning agreement?
Public Service Commission.
So will it be standard for like across the state?
I hope so.
Does this bill say that?
It does not.
Should it? I mean, what I'm saying is that I've heard from farmers who feel like in signing contracts with solar developers, they've gotten ripped off. Like they haven't, the terms that, because they don't have their own lawyer, the terms of the contract rips them off. So I'm concerned that if they don't have a good decommissioning agreement, they may also get ripped off.
The decommissioning agreement has to be approved by the Public Service Commission, and Public Service Commission will make that determination.
I think we probably need standards for a decommissioning agreement, like some kind of.
So there are standards because every generating station, be it solar, be it natural gas, be it nuclear, has to have a decommissioning agreement with it. So anything that creates power has a decommissioning agreement associated with it.
Does that ensure that the soil gets, the soil gets back to, I mean, I would assume in a nuclear power plant, there's nothing in the decommissioning thing that talks about the soil going back to its original form.
But if you think about a natural gas plant, you think about coal ash for a coal plant, when it's decommissioned, so Brandon Shores, when it's decommissioned, it has to be returned to, as best it possibly can, the way that land was prior to that facility being built. That is in law.
Okay, Devin?
Okay, so 4. The total combined number of solar energy generating stations that may be approved for construction in a priority preservation area that was established before January 1st of this year shall be limited in area to 5% of the total acreage of the priority preservation area. Will be located in the project area within the priority preservation area, and the project area is defined as where the solar is going to be and then where the trucks might be, and meet all of the other requirements under this section. So let me say that again. Total combined number of solar energy generating stations shall be limited in area to 5% of the total acreage of the priority preservation area, be located in the project area within the priority preservation area, and meet the requirements of this section. Sub 2, or II, the prohibitions do not apply to the remaining 95% of the priority preservation area once the 5% limitation has been achieved. So this does not, once that 5%, and I think the chair says this, once that 5% in, I can't use my own county because we don't have it, but Baltimore County, once that 5% is reached, then you cannot put any more solar in that priority preservation area, period. A county shall report to the commission when that 5% is reached.
Okay, let's keep going. Let's.
Page 13, the last language dealing with the solar provisions here in this bill. Nothing in this section may be construed to add any additional limitations to the authority of the commission in the approval process for a CPCN. So for the questions that were over on this side, the normal approval process for the CPCN still applies. Okay, that was fun. Page 13 at line 7 begins the energy storage provisions of this bill. So the energy storage provisions are a lot simpler than what is in for the solar provisions. So person may not begin construction of a front of the meter, and you're going to hear me repeat some of the things I said in the solar provisions. A person may not begin construction of a front-of-the-meter energy storage device unless the construction has been approved by the commission in accordance with regulations adopted by under this section. Upon receipt of an application for a front-of-the-meter energy storage device, the commission shall provide immediate notice or require the applicant to provide immediate notice to the governing body of each county or municipal corporation. Senator?
Senator Washington?
I was going to wait till you were done.
Okay.
So, yeah.
The commission shall provide immediate notice or require the applicant to notify the governing body of each county or municipal corporation where the energy storage device is going to be constructed. The governing body of each county or municipal corporation within 1 mile of the proposed location of the energy storage device. Each member of the General Assembly representing any part of a county in which any portion of the energy storage device is proposed to be constructed. Each member of the General Assembly representing any part of the county within 1 mile of the proposed construction of the energy storage device. The affected communities that are within 1 mile of the proposed location of the energy storage device. I'll stop there.
Okay, that's a good.
Senator Washington?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so this section is about energy storage, but my questions are probably more I've been able to think through it a little more. So I think the first thing is, what are the steps of the development? So, of the storage. So there's the construction of it. In other words, what's the first step? If there's a site you want to somebody wants to locate a storage, battery storage, what's the first step in this process?
The energy storage siting provisions are going to be determined, as I'll get to in a second, they'll be determined by the commission through regulations, but they're the same as any other generating station development. So you're going to pick a site. You're going to most likely pick a site close to either a transmission line or transformers, utilities,
And who picks I guess I should ask, so who picks a site?
So the owner of the solar energy, or the owner of an energy storage generating station would, as he or she would for a solar energy generating station or a natural gas generating station or any other generating station, they're going to find their site. And they're probably going, we used to talk about all the time the smart developer. And so the smart developer is going to engage with the local jurisdiction where they want their facility to be built. Right. They're going to engage with the regulatory agencies associated with that development. They're going to pick their sites in consultation with, or at least thinking about what they need to develop an energy storage facility. As we sit here today, most energy storage device build-outs are going to be contemplated to be connected with or at least closely adjacent to utilities.
I'm going to try to get some steps. So there's a site, is there a site development plan? So I pick a site, or I'm interested in, do I offer a site development plan? Like, do I get a permit? There's some reference here to an application, but for approval, but what are the steps before that?
So let me go through the rest of the section, and then we'll come back to that.
Thank you. Okay.
Because I think it might be answered later.
Right.
So each member of the General Assembly representing any part of the county where within 1 mile of the proposed energy storage device, and the affected communities that are within 1 mile of the proposed energy storage device. When reviewing an application for approval under this section, so the energy storage generating station has found its site and has applied to the Public Service Commission. The commission shall, if the proposed location of the front-of-the-meter energy storage device is in an area considered to be overburdened and underserved, require the applicant to hold public meetings, in addition, again, to the public meetings that the Energy or the Public Service Commission requires. it exempts a front-of-the-meter energy storage device if it is inside the fence line of an existing electricity generating station. So if Pepco decides to partner with or create their own energy storage devices inside their fence line, they're exempt from these requirements because they're already covered for the utility there as well. So, Senator Washington, in the instance that an energy storage device is required, the Public Service Commission is going to adopt regulations to answer the questions that you have cited to me. They are going to be able to say, okay, you've got your application has to meet these steps prior to it ever coming before the Public Service Commission.
I think what we're talking about is that perhaps we should set some guidelines or some recommendations of what we'd like to see in this. Because I think I want to ask this question. Do we have any specific state stormwater guidelines, regulations, permits, or plan review related to the review of a site development plan or the approval of a plan?
So in current law, there are no, I'm hearing whispers
sure.
behind me. Come on, Dom, come on.
Okay, come on, Dom.
Dominic Butchko, Maryland Association of Counties. So yes, there are state regs that local governments have to follow when looking at site plans that have to do with stormwater. Same thing for forest conservation. There is some flexibility, but most of it's really set at the state level. Specifically for solar? I don't believe for solar,
don't.
no.
Okay.
That's what the previous section covers.
After a fashion. So I think what I know that members here want to make sure, at least I'll speak for myself, that there is some guidance for the regulations. We don't going to write the regulations, and that it's very clear about soil characteristics, ground cover, flooding, all of these things, because this is why we're doing it. We need to have some kind of state-specific standards, and I just keep not seeing the word permit and review, site development review plan, because it simply says that the developer or the person who wants to do the generating just writes a letter and says, I've abided by everything. But I don't see anywhere where somebody is reviewing the plan. So if I'm missing that, or we need to put that, they're just, in other areas, we will assign a department or the agency, if there's some agency within the PSC that reviews plans.
So for the solar energy generating station provisions that I just went through, the current law still requires them to go through all of those MDE, environmental permitting processes prior to getting a CPCN. So right now, if you're building, that's in the environment article that tells them what they're supposed to do.
Okay, so can we reference those laws? I
Sure.
feel much more comfortable. It's very clearly in this section that we reference, MD whatever, and make it very clear what the standards are. I'd like it for all, but particularly for overburden, since we're talking about that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me get to a
Okay.
resolution on that.
Senator Hester.
Sorry, I'm still confused, because if all the MDE laws apply, but let's hypothetically say we've got 5 acres or 6 acres out in Garrett County that used to be farmland, so they used to have a nutrient management plan. And if they were growing turf out there, they'd have to have a nutrient management plan. If you take 5 or 10 acres and put them into solar, what MDE or MDA permit covers what you put on those 5 to 10 acres of solar?
So on the stormwater side of it, you would still have to follow stormwater management and all of that. So any kind of permit that you get for construction, you would have to go through that process. That's a state process. So I think there's some confusion on when we were talking about the standards in here, what they apply to. They apply to what the local government set. They don't apply to whatever additional requirements the state sets in state law. So we still have to enforce stormwater management. We still have to enforce forest conservation. All of that's still the same. So that'd be true if you turn it from a sod farm into a solar thing or to a Walmart. You'd still have to follow those permits because they're state level.
But stormwater permits do not have anything about herbicides. Yeah. Do they?
I would have to follow up, I'm not sure.
They don't. So there's nothing to control if we do a large solar project, acres and acres somewhere. We hold, like, our farmers are like really good stewards of the land. You know, we regulate them, and Pennsylvania sends down a lot of chemicals to the water here. I just want some kind of guarantee that we're not going to have major runoff from these acres and acres of solar.
Okay, we're getting all these issues out on the table. Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Devin, I need you to help me paint a picture here of, sorry, are you not the artist here? Okay, so going back to decommissioned, or just there's a plot, going with what Senator Hester said. There are acres and acres. It's the perfect place for a solar installation. Are there multiple companies that could be bidding on the same plot? Or does one entity own it, purchase it, in the hopes that they're going to go through all of these steps and get it approved?
I mean, that's a market-based question, Senator. So if this acres and acres of land is prime land for solar development, I would imagine that there would be multiple solar companies seeking to purchase that land and place solar in there.
I would too. Okay, so in that scenario, so no one owns it yet, and there are multiple companies all wanting that perfect space. So they would have competing bids. They would all be reaching out in the community. They'd all be having these public hearings. Then they would all, after they all comply with all that, then they would all apply for the CPCN?
No, so it's the owner. It's only the owner. So these multiple companies come to, someone owns that land.
Okay.
Someone in the world, in Maryland or whatever, owns that land. The company X, Y, and Z are going to approach that owner and try to purchase that land. That's the very first thing that a solar developer will do, would to be purchase the land that they want to put the solar development in. And upon that purchase, then that makes one single owner who would then be required to go through these hoops in this bill.
Okay, that's not exactly what I understood you saying a couple minutes ago, which is, you said that there could be multiple bidders.
There could be multiple people approaching the
Trying
owner
to
of
buy
that
it.
property trying to buy it.
But only one gets
But only
it.
one gets it, and then that one goes through the process.
So I understand that better now. The only question is, so I'm the winning bidder, and now I own this property, and I'm taking a bit of a gamble because I don't know whether I'm going to make it through all these hoops, and it could be that I have property that I can't use for the purpose for which I am trying to do the investment.
It's possible. That's a
It's the
risk.
United States of America.
No, I'm just
That's how
seeking to
that's how
understand
things
this.
works.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can I suggest one thing, just to kind of maybe, everybody can take some notes of other, Dev, can you just, we're on page 13 to 20. Can you
Breeze
just
through it.
maybe go through the rest
Breeze
of the bill?
through it. Yes,
Because
I
I
will
feel we're
breeze through
getting
it.
bogged down, and I just want everybody to get the big picture, and then we can loop back, okay? If everybody's okay with that. So Dev, just go from here to the end, and people could put down what questions they'll ask at the end, okay? If that.
Okay,
yeah.
page 14E, an owner of the proposed front-of-the-meter energy storage device that will not be constructed at a commercial or industrial location has set siting requirements as well, at least some. provide non-barbed wire fencing around the energy storage device that is not more than 20 feet in height, may use barbed wire fencing around the critical infrastructure substations, shall provide for a landscaping buffer. A local jurisdiction may not approve the use of a berm. The buffer required in the paragraph be not more than 25 feet in depth, provides for four-season visual screening with respect to the sites. The owner of the site shall minimize grading to the national maximum extent, may not remove topsoil, may not use herbicides except to control invasive species in compliance with Department of Ag. So that's the parts provisions for energy storage and their buffering, et cetera. F, a local jurisdiction may not adopt zoning laws or other regulations that prohibit the construction or operation of front-of-the-meter energy storage devices or deny site development plans for front-of-the-meter energy storage devices that meet the requirements of the previous subsection. A local jurisdiction shall expedite the review and approval, adopt standards for processes and review of the approval of construction of the front-of-the-meter energy storage devices. The commission may waive or modify the requirements under C, D, and E, not these two requirements in F. And the commission shall adopt, important, the commission is going to adopt regulations. The amended bill puts the onus on the commission because the commission has the ability to make sure that the energy storage devices comply with all of the other provisions and the permitting provisions required under law. Okay. We are done the energy storage and solar sections. The next two sections deal with automatic enrollment for community solar programs. If you go to page 16, automatic enrollment project is a community solar energy generating project in which all of the portion of the subscribers are automatically enrolled and is owned or operated by a local jurisdiction for which a local government or its designee acts as the subscription coordinator. If you would skip to page 20. So what community solar does is it provides an opportunity for folks, let's use my hometown, Baltimore City, as an example, that don't have land to build solar, maybe don't have flat rooftops or other appropriate rooftops for solar. And so you all created a community solar program a few years ago. And what this section of the bill says is it allows the local jurisdictions to automatically enroll residential customers into a community solar program. It prioritizes the enrollment of low and moderate income folks in the community solar program so that low and moderate income folks have an opportunity to receive the benefits of the community solar generating process. So these sections here just alter that proposal or alter that process in order to make sure that page 20, lines 10, that if there's a credit that's associated with this that goes back to the customer, it's allocated to one or more subscribers by the subscribing organization to make sure that the local has the authority to credit that back to the enrollee, and that generation credit, if anything hasn't been allocated, that will be sent back to the electric company's process to send then and re-up the enrollment process and re-up that credit to be disseminated throughout to others. The beauty of this section is on page 21. We're going to require the Public Service Commission to establish and maintain a program for automatic enrollment projects. So the Public Service Commission will oversee the locals, the utilities, to ensure that the appropriate community solar process or credits and the program is being managed correctly. The regulations shall establish procedures for a local government to apply to approve an automatic enrollment project. The application procedures will require the local government to include in application a local law, contract, or administrative approval that states whether the local government will own or operate one or more automatic enrollment projects or serve as the subscription coordinator for one or more third-party owned automatic enrollment projects. So the local government can own it. They can also partner with a third party and say, you manage it, I own it, you own it, I manage it, and I'm going to serve as the subscription coordinator to help you get enrollees into this program. So important that in this program, now I'm on page 22, line 14, originally the bill said half, but now it says 60% of the automatic enrollment subscribers must be LMI subscribers. And once that achievement of the minimum LMI subscriber percentage is hit, then the subscription coordinator or the local government can enroll other non-LMI subscribers. Again, the important provisions of this are designed to try to get solar, the benefits of solar energy and the lower cost associated with that to as many communities and as many low and moderate income folks as possible. I see there's a question.
Yeah, so everybody's been holding off questions. Let's
Oh,
skip. No,
I was
we're
gone.
good. I wanted him to go. We were on page 13. I wanted him to get through the bill.
We are
Everybody's
quite through-
copiously taking.
We
well,
aren't
not-
quite through the bill yet,
Okay,
Mr.
hold off
Chair.
for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Okay, and then we'll take questions from everybody. Okay, Devin, why don't you just go to the end, and then we'll go start with Senator Augustine.
So there's an opt-out provision on page 22, line 26. The local government shall comply with any request from a subscriber or a potential subscriber to decline or opt out of the automatic enrollment project. Page 23, at least 90 days before subscribers begin receiving their first bill credits, the local government or a designee shall basically remind the automatic enrollment subscribers that they are enrolled and that they will begin receiving a credit. And it shall include a statement that the local government has established an automatic enrollment project, that the subscriber or potential subscriber will be automatically enrolled, and they have the right to decline or opt out at any time. Also, an explanation of the consolidated billing procedures, detailed instructions on how to submit an opt-out request, contact name, phone number, email address, and a statement that the local government will have access to and using electric company data to be able to facilitate the establishment of the automatic enrollment project. So in addition to in the data that they will receive, they will be provided access to the billing usage of a customer so that when they enroll a customer, they can show them whether or not that by enrolling to the automatic enrollment process is going to save them money. Point of service delivery, participation in energy assistance programs. So this is an opportunity to reach out to potential enrollees to give them the breadth and depth of information that they may need to help assist them with making this decision and other energy assistance programs that exist in the law. And unless waived by the commission, the enrollment and management of subscribers is subject to all applicable commission regulations in which the commission already establishes and which the commission will establish as a result of this bill. Okay, we are through the automatic enrollment process for community solar. We're now on to residential rooftop. So current law does not have standards or any kind of requirements for residential rooftop solar. So this section applies only to residential rooftop solar. A seller or lessor of residential rooftop solar energy systems shall provide to the buyer or lessee a 5-year full warranty on the installation and component parts of the system. They should include any manufacturer's warranties for any of the products or components of the system. They shall inform the buyer or lessee of the minimum level of weather-adjusted energy production that the buyer or lessee may expect from the system. So that is, we're not going to lie to you. We're going to tell you that your system is only going to produce this amount of energy and when adjusted for weather. So if it's a rainy day, your system's going to produce this. If it's a sunny day, your system's going to produce that. And then certify in writing that the installation in the system is compliant with all federal, state, and local laws regarding workmanship, and that the panels, inverters, racking systems, and all other components meet the minimum standards for product design. Again, none of this is in law currently. The Maryland Department of Labor will develop a special solar contractor license for this, the installation and maintenance of residential rooftop solar energy generating stations, and will establish minimum qualifications for individuals installing and maintaining residential rooftop solar energy generating stations. So a penalty, sub D, page 25, a seller or lessor who violates the requirements of this section shall pay a fine, $1,000 for each violation. Okay, we're in the uncodified language, page 25, and this language is a study. The Public Service Commission shall conduct a study to establish a process by which the commission may establish power purchase agreements, partnerships between electric companies and electricity suppliers, or other procurement models for electricity generation projects. The process established here must include a method for determining whether any of the procurement models specified in this section will contribute to resource adequacy by increasing by 100 megawatts or more the electricity supply of the state that's accredited by PJM Interconnection LLC. It will also require a generating station constructed under any of the procurement models that are identified. And again, that's power purchase agreements, partnerships between electric companies and electric suppliers, or other procurement models. Require that any of those procurement models are connected to the electric distribution system in the state. Require that if it's a partnership, if one of the procurement models chosen is a partnership between the generating station and the supplier, that the electricity supplier with an electric company constructs the generating station. Requires that the electricity supplier and electric company using a procurement model here jointly seek and receive a positive credit rating assessment from a credit rating agency. Require that the Public Service Commission expedite any proceedings and approval for a certificate of public convenience and necessity under any of these procurement models. And again, this is studying that and studying whether they could prioritize this, if necessary, over other proceedings. Require that the Public Service Commission take final action on it under the procurement, any of the procurement models, no later than 180 days after the Public Service Commission determines that the procurement model will provide resource adequacy. Requires a state agency to provide within 90 days after the PSC has notated them any filings of, or any other person filing to intervene. Require the PSC, the Department of Environment, Department of Natural Resources, and any other impacted state agency to expedite any regulatory requirements or decisions. Again, all studying this. This is not in law. This is what the Public Service Commission is going to study. Require an electric company to expedite any processes that they would do. So this study says PSC study how you require the utilities to expedite their processes, and study and identify the potential rate impact for each of the procurement models identified in this subject, and then prioritize the one that has little or no impact on customer rates. And this report is due by December 1, 2026. So if that sounds familiar, it is designed to provide information for the Public Service Commission to go along with some of the provisions in Senate Bill 937 that was passed yesterday.
Okay. Devin, you know, it's funny, at the beginning I said it wasn't going to take 2 hours because it's only 20. I really messed that up. A lot of questions here, man. Okay, I know you were taking, we got to page 13 and we kind of stopped, but we'll start with Senator Augustine and Galli and get some more questions out here on the table.
Thank you. It's on the automatic enrollment piece with the, so how does it work if it's a community that doesn't have any LMI people? low and moderate income people? Or does it work?
So,
Or are they just not a part of it?
so anecdotal evidence, no, not really. From my tenure at the Maryland Department of the Environment, there is no county in the state that does not have people that are in low and moderate income.
Well, right, but this is not, I don't think of this as from the county standpoint. I'm thinking about the municipalities, which definitely do not have uniform, 50% or whatever, low and moderate income. I mean, and that's really, my understanding. Well, let me just ask you that. Is it that we are doing this opens up to the counties, or does it open up to the counties in all of the municipalities?
It opens it up to the counties and all municipalities, and the municipalities would probably be more the ones who will be establishing community solar programs.
Exactly, and so that's what I'm saying. So there are many, many municipalities that do not have the low and moderate, that amount of low and moderate income. So I'm wondering about that. We've also had legislation in here. The second part is I do have a little bit of a concern with the auto enrollment, is that there are protections for low and moderate income folks as far as the savings that they get. But I can't recall if we did that for everybody, or did we provide the protection in the law? We did that last year across the board as it relates to community solar. So I'm just curious about that, because I'm a little concerned about the auto enrollment situation, but that would be helpful to understand that. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, let's, Vice Chair Kagan, then we'll go to Senator Gallion.
Sorry, thank you, Senator Gallion. This was really, we were having a Vulcan mind meld here, Senator Augustine. I was exactly in the same place and with very similar questions. I get something in the mail and I don't speak English. Or it says, click here on this website, but I don't have a computer. So I wonder about folks who really won't understand what they're being asked. And it says that they've got to have a phone number and an email and a website and all that, but I just worry that people won't be able to understand that. So we can come up with some ideas offline, but I think inclusion and making sure we can make sure that our constituents are educated about their options, I think would be important. So I just want to echo and amplify a little bit of what Senator Augustine was just asking about.
Sure, I know that in this section, in the automatic enrollment section, there has been debate about opt-out versus opt-in.
Yes.
So
that with election law.
Fortunately, I don't have a vote, so the wisdom of the committee is the wisdom of the committee, and whatever you all decide will be what we do.
Go around the horn, Senator Gallion.
Thank you for your patience. I don't normally ask this many questions on these bills, but I'm getting a few out today. And some of this, we went through a lot of material. You've done a great job, but I might have missed a thing or two. So I just want to kind of start a little bit at the beginning and just see what is the definition of a priority preservation area. So does that include ground that's in Ag Pres through the state program and the local programs?
Correct.
Is it just ground that's in some sort of preservation program?
So I will, Senator Gallion, I happen to have a map of where the priority preservation areas are. I also have a list that I didn't bring with me that shows the total acreage of the priority preservation areas, and I will share that with the committee. But here is a map.
So it looks to me like this. So for instance, in Harford County, it's not just ground that's in wait till people get the map. It's not just ground that's in an ag preservation program. It's all the ground pretty much that's not in what is the development envelope.
Correct.
So this means almost all ag zone ground, looks like.
I mean, I don't obviously know your county off the top of my head for that, but yes.
Okay, so is there any concern with, so I know some counties don't really have a county ag pres program. They rely on MALF or, other state programs. But I know in Harford County, they have a very active and robust local ag preservation program, the county program. And people signed up and they, it's through the, you give up your development rights through these easements. And there's no concern that this is going to violate those easements. I mean, you're not? What's Ross got? He has something to say, looks like back there.
Easements are contractual, and so nothing in state law can abrogate an easement that is a contractual right. And so if land is placed in easement and that easement prohibits the construction of solar, this bill cannot override that contractual obligation.
So if solar's not allowed in that county plan, it wouldn't be able to go on that ground, you're telling me?
I'm saying that if the property owner has entered into an easement with the county that restricts solar from being built, then that easement would apply, but not all land is subject to the same easement requirements.
Okay, because some of these preservation programs, like if a farmer wants to do like a wedding venue or something like that, they had to get permission through the MALF board or through the local, so just questions about that. And just so there's no limits placed on non-PPAs, but I guess looking at this map, I mean, that's going to be mostly either mountains or, non-rural areas, it looks like. So there's really no limits on non-PPAs as far as how much you can put.
That's correct.
Now, next question. Next, we started off, asked about our solar goals. And I think you said you had some information. So is it 20,000 or 30,000 acres is what I believe MEA director told us?
I believe it is between 20 and 30,000, I believe.
Okay.
I will triple check that.
If that's 20 to 30,000, so 30,000 I believe would be on the high end, so it's probably right in that range. At the 5% of everything in the green on the map, how many acres is that?
I have it. I just need to find it. There it is.
And as he looks at that to the committee, the reason I'd like to know that is I want to be able to equate this percentage that we have potentially in this bill with what our goals are. And if it's way over, I think we need to adjust the percentage.
The total acreage in the state in the priority preservation areas is 2,051,092 acres. 5% of that total is 102,555 acres.
Okay. 102, so that's...
So the 5%, the total acreage in priority preservation areas are 2,051,092, 2,051,092. 5% of that is 102,555.
51,092 times 0.02. So 2% would be 41,000 acres, colleagues, and our goal is 30,000. It would take 30,000 to get our solar goals. So if we're even at 2% is 11,000 higher than that according to my quick math estimates on here. Just want to put that out there. That's a real, 5% in my opinion is just way, way, way too high. Solar and battery storage. So we talked about that. I'm assuming that most of these areas you're looking at, and this may go to the sponsor more than to Devin, you're looking at having them together on this, so you're...
Yeah, well, I think...
on the same properties?
Well, my understanding, is that, first of all, solar is intermittent, and the way you untap that value is tapping it and collaborating in tandem with a battery storage device, because that, you can store it, you can use it and deploy it, when
This would
necessary.
allow
So
them
the
to
two,
be on the
that
same-
seems, I'm sorry, yeah, so I'm no expert on this, but that's my understanding is you got to look at them somewhat in tandem, because that's, and now, do they have to be, how close do they need to be? I probably have somebody expert to kind of lay that out. But yeah, I think the value of solar is expanded exponentially when you've got battery storage in the, somewhere close by, because then you can store it and deploy it. Because it's,
So it could be,
you know,
I mean, when you're doing the fencing and the shrubbery and everything else, it could all be in the same
well, I want to
footprint,
defer. I'm
potentially?
no expert on that, but maybe Devin can help me.
can be?
Yes, it can be. So what, in that situation, Senator Gallion, you're going to establish the battery storage system if you're connecting it with solar inside the footprint with the solar energy generating station, and where the solar energy generating station interconnects with the grid, because the idea is the battery operates two-way. So you're going to be able to store the solar energy and then push it out to the grid. So imagine that if this is a rectangle and you've got the interconnection in the back of the property, that's where the energy storage device would be. In addition, recall that in Senate Bill 937 that you all passed yesterday, you have now required the utilities to provide 150 megawatts of battery storage, of distribution level battery storage. That's how they are going to get to that 150 megawatts.
Okay. And I'd like to thank the committee. I normally don't ask this many questions, but if you look at this map and you see where that green is,
You don't. No
Okay.
disclaim, listen, no,
Yeah.
you don't have to make any,
That's right.
no
No.
further
Well, if I can get some
disclaimers
sense
on any
going
of this
on.
stuff. You can ask whatever you want.
That's why I didn't want to show you
So-
that map, Senator.
what's that? So I thank you for your indulgence, everybody. So just one last one, an easy one. This is an easy one. So, and it's probably on the other part too, but I think this is, page 15 is like the battery storage part. It talks about invasive weeds. I know in Hartford, I serve on a noxious weed committee. Is there really, is that same thing,
It's the
right?
same thing, yeah.
I
Well, I mean,
think noxious might, maybe a better word there.
How about invasive and noxious?
Yes, that would cover it all. If, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Senator Brooks?
Thanks, Chair. I think there have been enough questions asked about all the others, but I'm just going to go to the residential. You're saying that the seller or the lessor have to provide the buyer or the leaser with a 5-year warranty?
Correct.
Yeah. I know that there is what they call the investment tax credit on some of those installations that where that credit, if you're a buyer, then you get the advantage of that investment tax credit, and that could sort of reduce your particular, the cost of that project by about 30%. So they would have to disclose that up front as well, and that credit would normally go to the buyer of the panels as opposed to the leaser.
I'm not sure on that one. I'll have to double check that one.
Okay.
But that it would make sense for them to be able to share that credit, to be able to push that credit down.
Right, okay. And that's the only other thing. And I'll say this too, the owner of the panels, there's software that's available, and oftentimes the installer will allow you to or tell you where to go to get that, and you can track how much electron you're generating daily, and it accumulates over a period of years from the time you install that system on. So that's an ideal way for individuals to get to see exactly what they're generating. So, yeah. All right, thanks, Chair.
Okay, we'll go to Senator Hester.
I think it would be helpful to have some more information from MEA and DNR, because we had, when we had the kind of informal work group, like in 2023, they were looking at a 40%, 60% split on solar between like ag and rooftop. And in the last data that I have, they were projecting that we would need 15,000 acres. Senator Gallion, are you with us? So in 2023, like, this MEA work group projected that we needed 15,000 acres on ag land. And you just said 30,000. So I would just like to ask that we get MEA to clarify this, if they're around. And then we also, in that kind of informal work group I did 2 years ago, we had DNR start to update their DG Plus tool. And we had reached out early in session trying to get an update on that tool from Dylan Bear. And then, like, because he transitioned, I'm not sure if our request ever got back to DNR for that update. But so we had worked to try to get all this land from MDOT, into the DG Plus tool. And we finally got the GIS files from MDOT and from DNR, and they had updated the DG Plus tool, but it's like, it's not publicly available yet. It's kind of, it's there, but we need somebody to kind of walk us through it. But I had the state-owned analysis done for, like, Howard County, right? We'd gotten really deep in the weeds, and we looked at taking out the screened, like, whether if it was, like, wetlands or forest or whatever. And so we had the DG Plus tool, we took out the screens, and then we looked 1, 2, and 3, and 4 miles within a transmission line. And so we had calculated that the state-owned land in Howard County was 270 acres. So, like, the state in Howard County owns 270 acres. This was back in 2023. And that 2,500 of that was in 1 mile of a right-of-way, and that within 4 miles of a transmission right-of-way was 6,700 acres. And so I've been trying to get a study to figure out how much land the state actually owns, across. But just looking at Howard County, so we could, without going on to any of these screened lands, we own somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000 acres in Howard County, and that could be MDOT land, that could be DNR land, but that's a lot of land, because if you only need 15,000. And Howard County has 2,000 to 6,000. Like, we could be doing all this solar on state-owned land and leasing it and making money off of it, which would be awesome. Like, when I lived in the Netherlands back, when I was a kid, they had solar panels and, in Europe going up and down the highways. And so, I don't know. I mean, I kind of think we're putting the cart before the horse with this. But anyways, I don't want to sink the bill, Mr. Chair, because it's your bill and you're a great guy. But, like, if we could just get this information from MEA, just clarification of whether we actually need 15,000 acres of ag land, 30,000 acres of ag land, or 102,000 acres of ag land, those are, like, big numbers. And then if we could just understand from DNR, from DNR, like, where we are with that tool, because I think the work's been done, we just need somebody to show it to us. That, I think, would be super helpful. So don't expect Devin to ask, but I just want to put that out there, like, those answers before we vote on this bill.
Okay, let's go to Senator Croza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to associate myself with both our resident farmer, Senator Gallion, and Senator Hester on their questions. But I specifically, and I want to be very literal, Devin, if I could, I wanted to understand how the community solar program works as a walkthrough. So let me just give me an example, because it looks like some is partnerships with municipalities, maybe not. So for instance, let's say I was looking at the map, where there's obviously quite a bit of acreage in Worcester County when it comes to the priority preservation areas. And then I'm thinking about, you got Snow Hill in the middle of the county, our county seat as a municipality. How would community solar work in Snow Hill? Like, even start with who the property, how that works.
So Snow Hill has a mayor, or a town
Yes.
council, or, okay. So the mayor or town council of Snow Hill would decide that they would like to enter into a community solar agreement.
With who?
With a solar developer.
Okay.
With a solar developer. And that town, Snow Hill, can own it and then subscribe community solar residents to community solar, or they can contract with a third party to own, they own the community solar, and the subscription goes to the town, to Snow Hill. And so what the cost of energy for the cost of the electrons that are currently being put on that community's bills would be offset by the lower cost of solar. So once the development is complete in a community solar project, and it could actually, there could be an existing solar development field or the solar field that could, you don't necessarily need to have already built the solar. You can partner with an already developed community solar program or a solar developer. And so then the town and the solar developer or the third party who's owning it enter into a contract. And that contract says, we're going to provide you with solar. You're going to help us subscribe individuals to that community solar program. We're going to work together to do that enrollment, and the difference between the actual cost, the cost of electricity currently on the bill will be offset by the reduced cost of using solar. So it's like being able to put rooftop solar on your house, being able to then connect that to the grid, and then that your rooftop solar offsets the cost of a regular generation, regular electricity generation, be it wherever the electrons are coming from. And so the individual who chooses to do that, or the community that chooses to do that, they get credits. So they will get bill reduction. We used to joke about it at MEA that we wish their meter could turn backwards, because then that's the reality of what happens when you put solar on the roof or you have a community solar project. The electrons that you are already buying are going to be offset by the cheaper solar electrons. And recall that also solar has RECs associated with it, so the cost of solar is less than the overall generation cost that you're seeing on your bill. I'll stop there because that's pretty much it.
Sarah Augustine, your light's on.
Yes, I had a follow-up on the help with the definition, or like, not all land is useful for solar, like the siting of it.
Correct.
And so if you've got a site that is, the example I was trying to give, like it's 100 acres, but only 20 of the parcels are really useful for solar, how does that count in the calculation of the 5%? Is it by the whole parcel that would be a part of that, or would it be the subsection of the, because we really only calculate by parcels, so that's my question.
So it is 5% of the total priority preservation area. So if you had some parcels on that priority preservation area that weren't suitable for solar, they wouldn't count necessarily, because you're not going to put solar there.
Where I'm going with that is, you have a parcel, and that's what we would know would be the parcel, or I'm asking, rather. So you got a parcel. Is it calculated by the parcel, or is it calculated by the actual solar, by the footprint of the solar? Because we don't normally have a way to do the footprint of the solar versus there's a parcel, which is how, my understanding, sort of how we divvy up property in the state.
So for the best way I can describe it is it's both. So it's because the solar array has to be contiguous on a parcel, including the project area. So you're going to have the solar array be the parcel, be the section in which that is going to count towards the 5%. It's where the solar array goes, plus a little bit of area for trucks and the equipment. So it is counted on where the solar array is going to be.
Okay, the reason why that's important is because the percentage, it has something to do with the percentage.
Correct.
As far as, like, it's just really important. I really would want us to just really understand that, because when we're talking about the need for actual sort of, like, there's a difference between the actual sort of solar and then actually how parcels work, and then actually how sort of land, suitable land works. And that's, I'm asking for that because that 5% may not, depending on that input, it will make a difference on what the 5% really means.
Understood.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, additional questions for Devin? Oh, Vice Chair Kagan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Devin, you're near the end. On page 25.
Am I there?
Sorry? Not actually that. Could you explain, if you know, or if there's an explanation at all, why the shift from MEA to the Department of Labor? And then I'm looking, and that's lines 8 and 9 on page 25. And then starting on line 10, it talks about establishing a special solar contractor license, which I think makes a lot of sense. What I'm curious about is, I assume then that would also be overseen by the Department of Labor. We used to, when we had health occupations, there was a board, there was oversight, there were licenses, and if you messed up, you could lose your license. None of that is in here other than establish minimum qualifications. But if you could just speak to kind of that section from lines 8 through 15.
Sure, happy to,
Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair. So both the Commission and the Maryland Energy Administration expressed the reluctance is not strong enough a word, but they did not have the expertise to be able to deal with the rooftop installers. And in fact, the Maryland Home Improvement Commission is the contractor's entity. And so rather than requiring specifically the Maryland Home Improvement Commission, we're requiring the Department of Labor here to be the ones to establish a special solar contractor license, which they assume would do through the MHIC.
Okay. And so they will either have the people or get the expertise or something, but through the Maryland Homeowners Insurance.
The vast majority of solar installers have contractors' licenses already, electrician contractor licenses, rather than having two agencies that don't deal with this every day do that. We have the Department of Labor doing it.
And again, are we going to allow through this the Department of Labor or MHIC to set the number of years for a license, the standards, the consequences if you mess up?
We will, so there is a penalty in here, but one penalty provision, but yes, I think we would want the Department of Labor to be able to do that.
Yes.
I don't, we could, I suppose that it could be a line that says the Department of Labor shall adopt regulations to implement this section.
I'd love to
And-
chat with you about that, because
Okay.
I'd love to see that section strengthened perhaps a little bit if the committee agrees. Thank you, Devin. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Okay, guys, additional questions? Okay, seeing none, Senator Hester.
Well, I thought there were other amendments.
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
Algra-
I
there's-
will, I
the
will,
Algra- yeah,
I
we do
will
have
speak
one.
to the other amendments.
Well,
I
you
will-
should have more than one, because I know there's an agriculture
Okay.
one and I had a study one.
Oh, okay.
I will-
Okay,
Sorry.
my apologies. Yeah, I forgot about that.
I will speak to the amendments very quickly. So there are additional amendments on your table. The first amendment is a two-page amendment that will be offered by Senator Hester. That amendment, from my understanding, deals with the exact issue that the senator just brought up a few minutes ago, requiring the Maryland Energy Administration and with the public utility, so the administration solar technical assistance program and also in consultation with the Public Service Commission and DNR, Department of Planning, to analyze state land suitable for solar. The second amendment that's on your page, which has my great handwriting at the bottom, is an exemption for agrivoltaics from the citing provisions of the bill, and then clarifications of what agrivoltaics means and what agrivoltaics do not mean. Agrivoltaics are solar facilities on land, and the requirements of the citing provisions of solar are not appropriate to apply for the agrivoltaics program.
Are those the two in our possession as of right
Those
now?
are the two in our possession as of right now.
Okay. Vice Chair Kagan.
On the Hester amendments, I think, yeah. Creating the database, I love the emphasis on brownfields and landfills, parking lots, blah, blah, blah. The very final line on page 3, the acreage that a state agency offers for use for solar development. Use, that doesn't mean sale. So they would stay in the state government ownership and the state would develop them? The database would be accessible to whom? Can you just flesh this out just a little? And maybe Senator Hester can do it.
The database should be the DG Plus tool, right?
The
So
database
it already exists, but it's not easily sortable. And the state land is not currently searchable in this way.
It says develop a database. So this is a new database on page 2, number 2. Develop a database sorted by county, identifying and recommending.
I'd be open to an amendment to the amendment to, have it be like, and it's supposed to be an option on the DG Plus tool. But the problem is, like, they actually have to do this analysis to figure out what lands will actually work.
Right.
And I mean, I firmly believe that there is a lot of land that the Department of Transportation owns, whether it is parking lots, rooftops, or easements. Like, you could put a solar array in a 4-leaf clover on a highway, and so then your point about number 3, the acreage that a state agency offers for use for solar development. So the state doesn't have to sell the land. It can lease it. This is like a win-win for the state because the state can make money, we get clean energy, and we preserve our farmland. The problem is that nobody's done the actual analysis yet.
So I love the idea. I just have some questions. Devil's in the details. Perfect.
Okay, Senator Carozza.
Thanks for the additional explanation, Senator Hester, on the amendment. With the goal of coming up with the amount of state land that may be used for solar energy generation, do you see that then would then take the pressure off of the PPA acreage?
Absolutely. I mean, what we need to do is to figure out how much land we actually need, whether it's 15,000 acres, 30,000 acres, 100,000 acres. And then the analysis that I saw from MEA was 60-40. So they wanted 60% on rooftops and canopies and 40% on ag land. And so then if you look at the land that we own, we do own ag land. The state owns ag land and also Department of Transportation easements and sorry, it's really late on Friday. But anyways, the thing is, you look at the land and then we could have a state goal. We could lease, why not lease like 15,000 acres of state-owned land for solar? And we just got to figure out where that 15,000 acres is.
Okay, anybody else want to put anything on the table? Senator Washington.
So this is just going back to again, I'll state that I think it should apply to all of them. Let me get back. But definitely would like to make sure that we're very clear about requiring that that there is a specific guideline, state-specific stormwater guidelines and regulations, and that there are, and I've been writing it up while I was here, so, in specific provisions, and that it can be done in not a whole lot of words, but that it really should do that, either as a part of what happens or how it's treated for impacted areas, or actually, as I think it should apply to the whole process.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, guys, seeing none, that concludes our work for today. See you on Monday at 10 a.m. This meeting's hereby adjourned.